When did you set up Dice, by the way? Dice Cafe.
I think where are we now? 2025. It must have been 2023, sort of autumn 2023.
I could tell you've got good faculty buy-in. Quite a lot of articles and
Yeah.
conversations are. I mean, the last one was published on 20th of August 25, so that's really recent.
Yes. Yeah. We basically tied it into our teaching and learning innovation fund that we have internally. So we had roughly 10 or so of those come through each year. And what I was finding was staff needed support for things. So through the Dice Cafe, I set up VR workshops, business simulation workshops, Kahoot workshops, and we used it as a vehicle to train staff on how to use those tools, but also to get people interested in doing their own sorts of things in those areas. And some of them, escalated into their own projects.
Okay. It's a great platform, really. And I could see the level of engagement has also gone up on the page. Okay, so it's 1:00 PM, so I'm going to start. So today our speaker is Mr. David Anderson. He's from Lincoln International Business School. I've sent an email with his introduction, what the talk is primarily going to focus on. But I did mention talk a couple of seconds ago, but it's really David wants to look at it as a conversation. So he's going to share with us several innovative pedagogical practices that he has invented and deployed in teaching and research. But also there'll be questions for us, we'll obviously our participants will have questions for David towards the end. So a very brief introduction to David. So David is the Director of Teaching and Learning for the Lincoln International Business School. He's part of the faculty leadership team. He's got responsibilities for improving and supporting teaching and learning practices across the school. So David runs the DICE Cafe. DICE stands for Digital and Interactive Classroom Experiences. I hope I've got that right. Which is an innovation hub supporting academics to identify, create, and trial digital and interactive classroom experiences. David also delivers the Advanced HE Professional Development course for external examiners, and you're also the editorial review board member for the Journal of Management Education. You do wear several other hats, but I think I'll just pause at that. I met David at the Prime UK and Ireland chapter conference, the annual chapter conference, and I was extremely impressed with what he presented on, what he talked about, and more importantly, perhaps, David, you and I had a conversation after that panel ended. So I'm very much looking forward to listening to your talk today, and I can see some of my colleagues have joined us also. I can see Andrea, I can see Homera, and people will join us as we go along. So David, over to you.
Fab. Thank you very much.
So you should be able to present.
Did you say you were going to record this session as well for anybody who's not here?
Yeah.
So, afternoon, everybody. Very nice to see you all. As Rick was saying at the start of this, I'm quite happy for this to be as much of a conversation as me just presenting information to you. But what I'll do is I'll talk through some of the journey that I've gone on since the Dice Cafe was set up, and some of the reasons behind setting the Dice Cafe up in the first place. So the framing of this conversation is really around scaling playful learning in higher education. And to give a bit of background to me, Rick's given some introduction. But what I want to do today is basically give a background to my research. How did I arrive at this topic, so that you can see where I'm coming from? And I'd be interested if you've got familiarity with playful learning, or your interests in scalability and the difficulties and challenges of doing those things yourself. I want to share a couple of examples. So one around Prime games that we developed from the seed funding, and another one which is around a educational escape room toolkit. So it's an adaptable escape room that you can move into different subjects and disciplines as you see fit. Because one of the challenges I find is people present on escape rooms, but then they can't move them into other topics. And then I'd like to end around any sort of like wider discussions or challenges that you might want to have around these areas. So going into the background of research, as Rick said, I'm the School Director of Teaching and Learning for the Lincoln International Business School. I've been working in higher education somehow for 18 years now, I don't know how, but I've been, module leader, program leader, linked with professional bodies, student engagement champion. I seem to have done a whole range of different roles. And I think this sort of idea of wanting to develop and improve my classroom spaces is what's moved me down this sort of line of research. So just for information, my background is around teaching innovation and philosophy, particularly in a kind of management context. I'm also doing a PhD at the moment, and my research is very much this area, scaling innovative pedagogy. And I've got three kind of areas that I'm looking at. One, I want to investigate the challenges that face educators who try to use playful learning or are anticipating using playful learning in higher education. Through the research, I want to design and develop scalable playful learning resources as well that people can use. And I also want to explore how higher education might develop to support playful approaches, because at the minute, there seems to be a lot of discussion about wanting these kind of things in our teaching, but not that so much support to be able to bring them into our classrooms. So I've used a fairly wide variety of playful approaches, some more successfully, some less successfully, some as a one-off occasion, and some of them on a more sustained basis. So again, I'll be interested if you've had similar experiences or different experiences with these. A few years ago in 2022, it all started with a research project around trying to bring board games into classrooms and seeing if we could make classroom spaces both fun and educational. And then since then, it's led to the use of card games, escape rooms, Lego, quizzes. And I've tried to bring faculty on board with me at the same time, because my role has changed in the last 3 or 4 years. I was just a program leader, and I've since then taken on responsibilities for staff development around upskilling them in different sort of innovative teaching forms. So my question has been, how can I introduce people to these, but also get them to build them into their teaching? And so some of these were quite adaptable, like quizzes through platforms of Kahoot could be adapted into other spaces, but then escape rooms and board games seem to be a little bit more fixed and a bit more challenging. A lot of this came from an interesting observation that I had around engaging teaching. So when we look at NSS, so I'm sure you're all familiar with, but at a national scale, so across the UK, in the opening questions around teaching, there's a question that says, how good are staff at explaining things? And typically, across all of our institutions, it's up here, like mid-92. But then the next question is, how often do staff make the subject engaging? And it's all the way down at 82%. And whilst that's still a high result, it's the biggest gap in any of the question sets in the NSS. And so my hunch, my theory, my gut instinct is that there's something that is happening in our classrooms where we're good at explaining things, but academics don't tend to do that in an engaging way. And I feel that there's something in playful learning that can help us close that gap between explaining things and making subjects engaging. So I came into this through 2 different communities. First, I was linked in with the Playful Learning Association, which is an interdisciplinary network who are all interested in developing playful solutions in higher education in particular, not just in business, but in all different disciplines. And they use so many different approaches that are presented through their conferences. It's fascinating. And then I later came to the Prime network and found out about the Impactful 5. And the common thing between the 2 of these is the Impactful 5 is underpinned by a commitment to playful learning. And I found it really interesting that these two networks, one that was interdisciplinary and one that was focused primarily on business, both in higher education, both with a commitment to playful learning. Yet when you look in the literature, there's very little crossover between these communities. One, the people who are attending both conferences don't seem to go to the other conference. And when it comes to publications, there's very little cross-reference between things that are happening in Prime linking to the wider playful learning group, or people within the playful learning group linking into Prime. So there's an opportunity here to explore how can these two groups either work closely together or learn something from each other, I feel. Just to give you a bit of a sense in a very light touch of like the momentum of playful learning in higher education. So 3 publications that I think stand out nicely from the field is one around developing a signature pedagogy in 2017, essentially laying out, what do they feel, what does the community feel is playful learning at this point. In 2022, establishing a manifesto for playful learning within higher education. What should it do? What could it do? And then finally, most recently, the Playful University, where there's been developments of how do we turn universities into playful spaces, and there's a development around the notion of the playful academic as well. And whilst this is still marginal compared to our mainstream, teaching and learning activity, it is growing in momentum and becoming more of a mainstream thing. It's worth recognizing that this timeline, at the same time, there's also Prime I5 that had their project that was developing in 2022 and has kind of come to a conclusion this year. So the two groups are in isolation, but kind of developing similar sorts of resources and approaches at the same time. So if you're not familiar with I5, it's the Principles of Responsible Management, Impactful 5 Principles, to basically provide a toolkit that can transform business education along 5 principles. So making learning meaningful, fostering joy and well-being, developing, supporting social interaction, facilitating active engagement, and designing for iteration. And what the Prime project did, it was a 3-year funded project, £6 million from the Lego Foundation, to basically draw on case studies from around the world that evidenced how academics in business schools were doing playful approaches in their teaching. And the outcome of that was the Prime I5 playbook, which started off as the view book of how do we take these interesting things and then put them into practice. So this project's sort of come to a conclusion now, and there's certification available around I5 and all sorts of things to support staff to bring in playful approaches into their classroom spaces. This year, the Playful Learning Association launched a research project called Replay, which is focused on researching the effectiveness of playful learning in higher education. So again, it's interdisciplinary, so it's not purely focused on business schools, and it covers the whole range of playful learning approaches, from analog to digital, escape rooms, card games, localized solutions, more templated solutions as well. And what they're aiming to do through this project is to develop evidence that shows the positive sides of playful learning, its effectiveness in the classroom, that it can enhance higher level learning, increase intrinsic motivation, combat fear of failure, improve sense of belonging, and enhance creativity. I just thought the timelines of these two were really nicely. 3 years from 22 to 25, and then a different focus, 25 to 28. So it's still active research being done in this area to gain momentum. So I suppose the question here is, where did it leave me? And I'm coming to a part where I want to take a pause in a moment and ask you for some thoughts, conversations, whether or not this sort of like reflects your space as well. But I saw this kind of landscape, and it appears that playful learning is growing as the future of business education. Whether it's authentic learning, whether it's links with businesses, whether it's about making teaching more engaging, when we put the student voice center stage, there's something about playful learning that receives a lot of positive responses and feedback from students that seem to be saying this use of simulations, this use of like active engaging learning is something that business schools want to be developing towards. The ongoing research gave me kind of confidence that it's not just something that popped up for a brief amount of time and then disappeared. The fact that it's a global movement across 800 or so business schools means that it's not something that is, although it is marginal, it's not something that will necessarily stay marginal. And then within the Prime I5 book, they demonstrate loads of really good case studies, a really wide, diverse range of case studies about how playful approaches are being used in the classroom. More case studies than I can kind of get my head around all of them or how to use them. But it also left me with some gaps. One of them was around, so you've got great case studies and you've got this research out there, but where are the resources that I can use to actually implement those things? Because as academics, we're all very busy. We've got a lot of things that we're keeping spinning at all the same time. And if you're going to not just come up with the idea of a new way of teaching, but you're going to try and develop resources and implement that into teaching, that can be a two-year or more conversation to try to work out how do I take it from something I've seen into something that is linked to a module, part of an assessment or part of our delivery. And then the second thing, along with limited resources, was there doesn't seem to be that much of a live, active conversation around scaling playful approaches within the academic community. It seems when I've spoken to people, there's a lot of excitement around scaling playful learning, but there's not many people actually tackling, well, how can we do it? And when we look at our academic landscape, there's not that many things that encourage us to work collectively together. It's often, what am I going to do in my module? How am I going to chase my promotion? As opposed to, what can we do collectively that would actually enhance our teaching approaches across the sector? So my response to this a couple of years ago was to set up the Dice Cafe as a practical way of trying to develop resources, develop collaborations for supporting people inside my organization, but also beyond, to make use of more playful approaches, although I didn't have playful learning in my head at the time when I set this up. So developing ways for people to support digital and interactive classroom experiences with students. And so I've worked with a number of staff projects over the last 2 years to develop e-learning videos, subject revision cards, hackathons, escape rooms, the Prime games, and then exhibitions as part of assessment as well. And you can find out some of the details at the Dice Cafe, but also you can download resources from some of those places for free as a way of being able to use these in your teaching. So the Prime games and the educational escape rooms have got kit that you can download for free and use them in your teaching. And then this year, I'm trying to actively work with people to understand how do they use these resources and what kind of obstacles or challenges do they have for bringing them into reality in their own teaching. So I think that brings me to the end of part 1, if you like. Part 2 is about talking about the Prime games in particular. The next one will be then talking about the educational escape rooms. But I just wanted to pause here and see, does that experience that I've sort of shared resonate with you? Is there things that I've missed? Are there any other sort of resources that are out there that you make use of or bring in playful learning in different ways? So I thought, instead of it being a 2-hour monologue, I'll open up a space for a bit of conversation or comments in the chat, if you like, that we can have a look and see if this is a shared experience or just, an isolated delusion of my world.
I'll wait for some colleagues to comment and perhaps share some of their experiences if they want at this stage.
Andrea, you've put your camera on. That's always a good sign.
Always a good sign. Andrew, okay, fine.
No, I don't. I don't use. I don't think I've ever used games in my classroom. For me, what I have experimented with the last few years is using film and actually using Hollywood film to make teaching engaging. So that's been quite successful, I think. But I'm curious to learn about games.
Yeah, we've used we had a module called representation of organizations in management and leadership, and we drew from films as well and got students to deconstruct those. I found those a really good approach. But you know, it's that sort of thing. You know, what do we do to help students become more engaged in the topics that they're studying? Where do you find a middle ground that you can get a boundary between what we want to teach them and a way in for them to be able to use their subject? So like Lego, although I'm not talking about it today, I use Lego in my philosophy module to get students to build metaphorical constructs of show me what modernism looks like and show me what postmodernism looks like. So we'll do a reading and then they'll construct the relationships through Lego. I'm just reading George's comment about learning people with other learning needs like ADHD. I do find that these sort of form of tactile ways of learning are good. I'm going to make a general comment, but they're good to reach. They're good to reach or engage people who have got that wider sort of like learning needs. For some people, it'll work really well. For other people, it might turn them off.
David, I understand Humaira is sharing something as we speak. But I've got a quick question meanwhile. So I was involved with the I5, impactful I5 since practically the beginning of the project, 2022, somewhat 2022, when Project Zero started in Harvard. That's where they essentially initiated the concept. So have been involved in a couple of projects looking at I5. My question to you, because I picked up quite a few things there in the previous slide that you were sharing, how did you inspire and involve colleagues and staff into this? Because I understand that you do have colleagues who are deploying some of these tools in their pedagogy. So what was your method, shall we say?
So I ran them as Dice Cafe workshops. Basically, at the start of that project, we had a load of kit. I'd applied for some funding. I bought some Lego. We had VR headsets. I got a demo for Kahoot for 6 months. And so we had 4 or 5 different resources. And I basically just ran a Dice Cafe workshop. So I put in a 1 hour session. I just sent a message around to the faculty saying I'm going to have 1 hour session using Lego or using board games, just to put them on the table and see what they were, see who came forward as a sort of like an early adopter that was interested in it. And then off the back of each of those meetings, the first 4 all led to teaching and learning innovation projects that were then subsequently funded through our college teaching and learning fund. So we kept them quite small, but it then gained momentum. So, you know, we were able to, I think, recruit 50 staff to start using quizzes through Kahoot on their teaching on a regular basis. We had 9 staff who wanted to develop cards for subject revision tools. And so we did that. We worked on a local basis that first off, who's interested in working together to develop the gem of the idea. Then after we got the project going, we had a sort of scalability focus. So we wanted to include more people than just ourselves. And we tried to do that in a way that was relatively low cost. And then we went with the idea that the outcome of those things would be some kind of professionally produced resource that comes out of it, so that those staff could use it on an ongoing basis.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Humaira, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your experiences in that. Something that I like to share was the fact that, okay, we all sort of have, I mean, having funding or resources for these sort of things, I found it challenging personally. So trying to use what we have, as Andrea was also saying, like using some videos and all, but something that I found quite useful, which I like to share, was Kahoot quizzes being designed by the students. So we had, like, for example, some smaller topics and ask each students to take one topic, and they were designing a 10-question Kahoot and run it for their peers. So it was quite the sort of dynamics going on between the students, that who makes the nicer Kahoot quiz and, you know, make it more more sort of fun images they put, and they were all sort of engaging in actually answering the quizzes. And in 2 years, actually, we gave it a very tiny, I mean, it was a formative type of assessment at the end of a series of teaching of some of the topics. But then at the end of each session, then we would run. So the first session was more of a information sharing and some teaching involved in class by the teachers. And then at the end of each session or middle of the session, then students were running their quizzes, which was quite good and less sort of resource intensive for the teachers. And these generations are actually generation of students are quite good at designing the Kahoot quizzes themselves. So yes, I just wanted to share that, and it was very, very successful. It proved to be.
Yeah, we, as part of our Kahoot project, that was one of the features available, and I used it with students too. I found it, what was great about it was we ask students to do reading for classes, and often they don't do. But the ones who did the Kahoot quizzes, they had done the reading to be able to work out what the questions were. So exactly. I was really pleased that they accidentally learnt about the stuff by having to produce the quiz, and then they got a kick out of the other students trying to complete it. So I think that idea of co-producing through students is a really effective way of doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I'll move on nicely to case study 1, which is the Prime games. I'll just have a quick cough. So the Prime games we came up with an idea. We'd done our internal funding around subject revision cards, and we wanted to see if this idea was just something that was interesting to Lincoln, or whether or not it would be appealing to a wider external audience. So we applied for Prime seed funding. It was £750. The call for Prime seed funding in the UK and Ireland is open at the minute. I think it's got another couple of weeks before that closes. So if you're interested in doing something, you can put something in. And we wanted to know, can we use games to be able to support students to learn about responsible management? And so I'll run through some of our approach. We presented this at Belfast, at the UK and Ireland one. Rick has made a cameo. And I try and get these cards out, not just in the talk, but anybody who's seen me at the conference knows that I've always got an escape room in one hand and the Prime game cards in another hand, and I'm talking to everybody about it, because when you've got them physically in front of you, you can sort of see how they might be used and how you might bring them into the classroom. So the aim of this project was basically to take existing games that were already commercially successful, and then to use those games to then create sustainable and reusable pedagogical tools, because Things like simulations. There's often an online subscription, £20 per student or so. You use it for 3 or 4 weeks, but it costs you thousands of pounds to be able to do it. We wanted to create educational packs, so that would allow people to have a copy of the game, as well as teaching and support resources that they could use to use those games in their own classes. And we wanted to make it a scalable approach for learning about responsible leadership and sustainability. And then finally, the project itself needed to embrace the Impactful 5 principles to make learning fun as well as engaging as students learn about whatever it was they were going to learn about in the curriculum. So I should highlight, I don't think that this is just a tool for learning about a module that focuses on sustainability. It's a way of doing it in marketing, finance, economics, HRM, and getting sustainability conversations into those spaces where ordinarily we might struggle to work out how to get them there. So we made 4 games. Prime Memory, which was based on a normal standard memory matching game. So you're taking, you've got a grid and you're trying to find 2 things that are matching. Prime Pumps, which was based on the popular card game called Top Trumps. If you've not played Top Trumps, the chances are that your undergraduate students have played it in one way, shape or form. There are hundreds and hundreds of different copies, whether it's dinosaurs, whether it's Pokemon, whether it's castles, whether it's bugs. The chances are that Top Trumps has appeared in these students' life at some point. Cards Against Humanity gave us inspiration for developing Cards for Sustainability. So it's a fairly social party game where people are interacting together and making decisions. Sometimes they're getting things wrong, but that's fine because it's like a very low level of failure. So you're kind of working out what is the right answer to some extent together. And then we created Concord, which is based on a deck building game inspired by Dominion. So it's very much a cooperative game where you play the game and you have to kind of adopt the principles of Prime about collaboration and cooperation to be able to make it make sense. I should say that all of these were made on a budget of £750. That was to create the resources that could be printed and played, and then also to create a sample deck of those things so that we could showcase, what they were. So it's not a huge amount of money, but it was enough to kind of prove what we could do. The content that's gone into these has very much been inspired by the 170 action documents, which are part of the Perception of Change project from UN Geneva project. There's 4 documents, each one with 170 actions that are either, as you can see, focused on transforming the world, reducing inequalities, combating climate change, or embracing a sustainable lifestyle. And these are really interesting documents just to go through on their own. But the problem that we found with them is that they're online. I know that they're very good for accessibility, but getting students to look at them and handle them was quite difficult to do. So the cards were a way of being able to make them come out. Rick, by the way, has got a copy of the slides, so after this he'll be able to circulate them to you, which is why I've put loads of links in, so you can go out to wherever these things are to you. So to give you a sort of top-level summary of the games, the memory game is to basically just introduce students to the 17 SDGs. If they've never come across them before, 17 is quite a long list to sort of read through, so it's a simple way of getting them to play through and just develop familiarity of what they are. All the games can be played with sort of 2 to 6 people, and they've been designed to work for roughly about 10 minutes. So you can bring them into a class as a 10 to 20 minute exercise, use them with students. You can either play the game with the full rules, or you can use them as a resource to kind of build them into wider resources that are there. Prime Pumps, we wanted to use these to do 2 things. One, introduce students to the principles of responsible management education, so the teaching values and so on. but also to highlight different SDG actions that could be done by an organization or an individual, and importantly would be relevant no matter which subject area you were talking in. The cards for sustainability, it talks about it's got there's 204 actions across them all, and so it's about highlighting the individual actions that a person on your course could do to contribute to one of the sustainable development goals. And it's designed, out of the 500 and some that were in there, we've specifically picked out the ones that are more individual based. So what activities can you do as an individual to contribute to reduced inequalities or reduce poverty in some way? And then the final one, Concord, we made this as a collaborative game where you had to work collaboratively in order to achieve the SDGs. And there's different actions that each of the cards have that encourage you to work in a way where you have to work together to achieve those. Otherwise, the game will beat you and you won't be able to complete the SDGs in the required amount of time. We haven't printed out we've got a sample version, but it's a game that probably takes longer than a normal seminar time, so we've not tended to focus on that too much. So what I'll do here is I'll run through a little bit of each of the games so you can sort of see what they look like, and I have copies here so you can sort of see. The memory game is a small pack of cards, 34 cards or so, and there's 2 copies of each SDG. Basically, I've used this with students where I would play a grid on a table 5 by 7, so they'd all be face down, and then students would spend the next 10-15 minutes turning them over, reading them out, so that they turn it over and they go life below land or climate action, and if it's not a match, they'd turn them back down and then they try and find it again. It's a very simple activity, but I was quite blown away by how engaged students were with that, because they're not that interested in sustainable development goals on the outset, but we then used that as a way to sort of draw their attention to the different top level categories, and then followed this basic activity on with an in-class activity to go and find out about the SDG targets, the kind of actions that had been taken by organizations over the last however many years, over the last 10 years, and what kind of progress had been made. And we used this as a starting exercise to help them get a focus for their assessment in this module. So it does things like helps them to make a logical reasoning or communicate with each other and develop awareness of these, but it also gives them an opportunity to talk with each other, share their interests, find out about something which is external to their immediate class that they might be interested in, but they didn't know really existed before the start of the session. The second one is prime pumps. And so what students do when they play this game is they compare these values, basically. So you'd have your card field trip in your hand, and you'd read out one of the values on here. Let's say purpose 81. Everybody else in the room would have their card that they're looking at, and they would see whether or not the purpose was higher or lower than 81. And if it was higher, then that if you had the card with the highest value on it under purpose, you would collect everybody's cards up, and if somebody else had it, they would collect all the cards up, and then you'd play again. So it's a simple mechanic of working out, who's going to win, who's got the highest card, but it's also a good way of making students share what are the different things that could be done within an area. So, for example, let's just take the ones that are on the board. Field trips. What kind of field trips could be organised either as a class or that an individual could do to go and find out more about your particular subject? So it might be that you're in HRM or accountancy. What kind of site visits or field trips could work well for those places? Debates. What are the kind of debates that are happening within that area? What does continual professional development look like for students who are interested in going into that area? So there's 34 cards in this that all draw your attention to different kinds of activity that are something to do with sustainability, that will change depending on the subject area that you're looking at. So again, immediately playing the game, you've got an idea of sort of tactical planning, risk assessment, and decision making. But then you've also got an activity that I would always say you should be encouraged to build onto this thing, where students select 1 or 2 cards and then they go, right, how can this be useful in my world? How might I create a research project around this? Or what kind of debates are in existence within this area that I might tap into? And you'll each have your own expertise and knowledge of those areas, and you can probably join some of those dots for students. So cards for sustainability can be done in a number of ways. You can either give everybody 10 of these white action cards, which each one of them have a particular action that will relate to one of the SDGs. So there's 6 actions per SDG. You can either have a single SDG in the middle, so it might be life on land, and you look across your 10 and you try and play one into life on land that you think is the most relevant. Or you could have a range of these SDGs. You know, you can ask people to either pick the ones that they think are most relevant or ones that they'd like to contribute to, and then sift through the cards and try and find which are the 6 actions that go with these. And so the guide gives you the definitive answer as the tutor. What are the 6 that are related to these? That are taken from the pack. But I found this a really interesting way to get students to argue, debate, discuss what is this action and where does it go to and how might I do it. So whether it's be brave and start your own initiatives, or encourage green innovation initiatives, or involve underrepresented groups in the environmental discussion, each one of these will go towards a particular SDG. Some of these students might look at and go, well, there's no way that I can be involved in that. Or they might be able to signpost towards what kind of activities are happening in their local community. So this way it gets them to, I suppose, consider, how do I as an individual contribute to these national or international sustainable development goals? Raises some critical discussion about where they might lie. Some of them might be easy, some of them might be hard, some of them might apply to 2 or 3 different SDGs, even though, you know, there is a definitive answer sort of like working there. And this just breaks down barriers between you as the teacher and the students themselves. So I find that as much as playing the game, there's the debrief activities that go alongside it, and then there's also the social aspect of this, where students can interact and work with each other as well. The final game is Concord. So I'll just sort of top level discussion on this. It's basically the underpinning part is the players go for their self-interest to try and win the game but not meet the SDGs, or do they work cooperatively to try and meet the SDGs? And then as they have to make sacrifices at that local level, it gives you an opportunity to kind of debrief the game with that gameplay in mind. You know, what were the constraints that you had to make in practice? How do those constraints that you did in the game relate to some of the things that you might do outside of the game? And so it very much encourages critical thinking, communication, teamwork, to be able to plan ahead. How are we going to do this? What sorts of things are going to be put on one side? Who's going to sacrifice something? And so there's this need for wider collaboration to beat the game, because there's a very limited turn order. So I think you only get like 6 or 7 rounds to be able to meet all of the 17 SDGs. And so you have to make sure that you're all pulling in the same direction, otherwise the time just runs out ahead of you. So each of these games, they've been designed that you can play them in different ways. So there's rules with each one of them, but you can use them as resources that you just work with. You can link them with external resources as well that's relevant to your subject area, so you can support that individual or module specific exploration. And if you want to bring sustainability or responsibility into your curriculum, but you're not too sure how, these are useful starting ways to bring that conversation in, that rather than needing it to be in a module that's specifically focused on sustainability or responsibility. So just to sort of show you some of the things that go alongside this, we developed some teaching support resources. So this is basically a very long set of slides that tells you how to play the games, what the intended learning outcomes are for each of the games, different activities that you could do in the classroom so you don't have to start from scratch, and then typical kind of debrief discussions that you might want to do. But obviously we're mindful that if we're talking to everybody in business schools and beyond, that's going to be a very wide audience. So I would encourage you, take these as sample activities, but adapt them as you see fit into your own sort of spaces. Just to give you an example of those, so we might play Prime Pumps with students, and I should say that the Prime Pumps game was kind of co-created with students last year. So we did this activity as the classroom thing to start us off. We put the 170 actions on the table, and we said to students, right, we're going to make a game. We want you to help us create this game. Can you create and define some of the actions for us that we might include in there? And so they would look through the 170 actions, pull out the word, put a description together. They then, then the activities that you can do is decide what kind of level is it a local thing that you might do as an individual, a national thing, company level? How relevant do you think it is to your subject area? We got them to write a short description and then assign the attributes. And then in one of our other classes, all of the artwork that's on the back was done using AI artwork, but it was all created by students using that as a classroom to get them to be exposed to what sorts of things can AI use. Another example is the cards for sustainability. So you can play cards against cards for sustainability and then get them to sort of set a personal action. So they choose a card that they think is interesting. They consider how they might implement that into their normal life, their studies, or their future career, and then consider what kind of barriers or motivations might stop them from doing that, and what kind of things they might do to increase the likelihood of that becoming part and parcel of their world. And then you get them to commit to a small, realistic thing that might step them in the right direction to do this. And so, like I say, you can adapt this as you see fit. There's 4 or so sample activities for each of the games that are suggested. And then one of the things that we thought was important for this is all of the resources needed to be made available for free. So they're up on the Prime UK and Ireland website. You can go to the link and download them for free. But then when we went to the Prime conference, I was inundated by people who wanted their own copy of these games that we'd printed out. And so off the back of the Prime conference, we got some funding together and we printed out 200 copies of each and have them on a website now. So if you did want to use them in the teaching and you didn't want to cut them out, you can buy a copy and then we'll just ship them over to you. But what came out of the Prime conference that was really interesting was this collaboration approach. Lots of people wanted to work together. So I set up a group called Ignite, which is focused on innovating and growing new ideas in teaching excellence. And basically it's a network of people with like-minded ideas to kind of co-create new resources and try to collectively find funding opportunities, so that rather than doing lots of things in isolation, we can hopefully work more collectively as a hub. So we have a small group, I say small group, a small army of people now connected to that's probably across about 15 different institutions that I'm keeping in touch with. And just about now that we've done the European Prime conference about to get back in touch with them as a larger community and say, right, what kind of things are happening in your world, so that we can bring some of those things together. So that brings me to the end of case study 1 before I get carried away and talk about anything else. So I don't know if there are any interesting things about those cards, challenges, considerations, or thoughts really about how you might bring them into your world, or if they're just things that are so far removed from your world that you wouldn't know where to start, because all of those conversations are interesting to me.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. I see Andrea is not on mute. Andrea, would you like to share something?
No, I'm just asking where you go with this, because obviously there is a time frame to the SDGs, right? So who knows what comes next after 2031, right? So, and also why do you think the SDGs are the best things? Maybe there are other frameworks that can be used for games.
Yeah, I don't think the SDGs are the only thing that are out there. What I would say is after 2030, it looks like the SDGs will be updated to maybe have a 2050 kind of goal. Whether they'll stay the same 17, whether they'll move them around or add in extra ones, I think is to be decided. But I think what I'm interested in is the bit that underlies this. So these approaches have been sort of like designed to be adapted so that you can teach sustainability, because when we put the bid in, it was towards the people who wanted to teach sustainability to people. But what I'm interested in underlying this is what kind of templates are there that are around that can be used and then adapted to different spaces. So what we've got here is one example of a template that is used to put sustainability on the table and can be moved to other subjects. So over the next few years, I'm hoping that these find themselves into different classrooms and people are able to put sustainability and responsibility onto the table, no matter what the subject is. But by all means, there will be other content that's out there. So you could take something like Top Trumps, and instead of making it sustainability, you might be able to do a HRM Top Trumps or an accountancy Top Trumps if that was the subject that you were interested in.
Fascinating, really. One of the challenges that I've seen in the past, particularly when you're running a curriculum audit, and I think we've got an expert in the room, Homaya, who recently did it. But in the past, one of the challenges that I observed was you've got some of the content slightly in a dispersed manner across the board, and it becomes a tick box exercise. One of the observations I made in your slides, David, you're highlighting the skills involved here. Yeah. And I noted at least 4 of them across the four different games that you talked about, that they were connected to some of the graduate competencies. And this makes sort of embedding this in the curriculum slightly easier. Because there's one thing about introducing and making sure students are aware of the SDGs, fine. But if we are not necessarily assessing them, not really sure about the level of skills they have in that area. So just being aware versus having some sort of demonstrable knowledge, that's different. So I think that's really interesting when you talked about the skills involved. I've just had one question regarding the prime pumps. Interestingly looking at it here at the moment, which modules did you deploy these games in? Or was it a separate sort of workshop, prime games workshop? How did you introduce it?
So I've used prime pumps in the module called Innovation, Creativity and Change, because it has a group work element into it. And the group work task is to do a project around the reskilling revolution. And so I ask students to start with the sustainability goals and then dig into a particular area around sustainability or around the SDGs that they can then go into. So we spend the first few weeks doing a number of activities to try and raise their awareness and get them involved in SDGs in somehow before they then do their group work. So we've used these over the last couple of weeks in different ways with students. The other one, I think it was Cards for Sustainability, was used with the accountants. So there was an accountancy module that they seem to struggle to bring in sustainability into their curriculum because it's usually quite numbers based. And so they brought this in as an activity to sort of help students understand and think about what could they do, but within that context of accountancy. When I first started presenting this, I did my presentation at a conference that was an internal conference and sort of showcased these cards. And then later on, the lady who had run this session in her accountancy module was running a session going, I used these cards in my module and it did all of these things for students to help them think about sustainability and get them talking about this. And I thought, oh, that's perfect. So it was really nice to sort of see it being used by other people who had not been directly involved in creating the cards, but how they could use it in their space to get students to have a sustainability conversation in a way that was otherwise difficult to bring into a module.
Fascinating.
I was wondering if you have seen some other sort of resources in here. So there's one that I've used. It brought a lot of sort of engaging conversations that is primarily focused on climate change, is the climate fresque.
Oh yeah.
That's the which is also quite useful. I had downloaded this set of cards that they have, but it seems that now you have to pay for them, and I was like, oh my God. It used to be, I mean, a couple of years ago when I downloaded them, they were free resources, but I don't know how come they now have paid. I am quite pleased to see that these cards for sustainability are free, assuming, which I think that's kind of breaks the barrier of usage, at least trying out in different disciplines. And what I also found quite useful is that when you have an interdisciplinary group of people, mainly in postgrad, or doing different things, then that becomes quite useful, because everybody then brings a set of skills or knowledge that they have, and that becomes a challenge in the middle that they can each contribute in resolving. So that's really, a challenge where there is one particular module and how they can be, because these are interlinked anyway. I mean, if we are talking about SDGs, for example, they are interlinked, and you are addressing one to a certain level of maybe deeper, but then you are, by doing so, you have addressed quite plenty of others. But yeah, I'm quite pleased to see that these are free, so we can try them out, because I mean, in terms of my concern is the resources and the scarcity of them. So it's quite challenging to buy in for support to spend money on something.
Oh yeah, definitely.
For trying things out. Yeah.
No, that, and having them available for free was a kind of a key thing, all the way through, because if they work in your module, excellent, use them as much as you like. But if you need something that's just a quick off-the-shelf thing, and we've tried to keep them very low cost as well, then that alternative is available. But that's our approach going forward. So what we've done, sort of following on from these, is we've started on conversations with the UN Global Compact, so that we can make them available in the store. And they've said that they should be able to either produce print on demand copies or so that are available at various different prices, which I think is great because it now means that we'll be able to get these cards into a kind of multinational audience, and price won't be a barrier to get them there. One, because they're free, but also two, because they can buy professional copies for cheaper as well. Yes, excellent. I've only heard about Climate Fresk, but I've not had the chance to be able to look into it. But I've taken down the link, and I will. I'll go and explore later on. Thank you for that. So, did you want to? So, you got a choice now. This, control your own adventure. Did you want to hear about the educational escape rooms, or did you want to have more of a conversation around, prime games or using playful learning or other sorts of forms of teaching and learning in the classroom?
Both are equally tempting, David. It's almost impossible to make a choice here, but I'm very keen to learn a bit more about the escape rooms, to be honest. And then, of course, we can have, we can continue the discussion afterwards.
Yeah.
If that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. So the educational escape rooms, similar sort of approach, resources that you can buy, which is all this stuff down here. So we'd print it out and then package it all together and then send it off to you. But also resources that you can download, as well as a kit list that tells you where you can buy these things from and how much they are. So let me click away. So we presented this at the Playful Learning Conference, Unlock the Fun, Design Your Own Educational Escape Room, designed particularly with scalability in mind. This is sort of what it looked like. This is what the escape room looks like. It is an envelope with some stickers on the outside, a Velcro patch to be able to open up, and I suppose the important thing here is it's designed as a template that you can adapt this escape room into any different subject that you want to be teaching in. And so basically you need 20 words, an image, and a quote, and you've got all of the basic resources that you need to be able to make it work. So what you're left with then is a flexible escape room template that you can adapt into any subject, 5 puzzles that again you can adapt into different ways. We've got a template that you can download and customize, and then we've provided all the information you need for a low budget approach that you can then enhance. So you can see in my small, this is the very low budget one, and then we have a slightly higher budget one with actual locks and things that you can open. So you can design it basically from effectively free of charge through to about £25 per box, whatever your budget kind of allows. And the resource pack for this is available at the Dice Cafe, so you can just download it and work your way through. Some people have worked their way through and just created their own ones, and other people have said, actually, let's put in an hour or so workshop, work through some of those things, and then just send me a complete file afterwards that I can print out. The escape rooms play in about 20 to 30 minutes with small groups. Normally you would have 4 copies or so in a classroom, depending on your sizes. It's comfortable to do it with 4 or 5 people for an escape room, but once you get to like 6 or more people, you end up with 1 or 2 people, dominating a little bit. So that's just to bear in mind. And then again, there's a resource pack with it that goes, what are some of the support discussions that you might have to help deconstruct or debrief the project with students in the classroom. So they're designed to be played and debriefed within a 50-minute session. This is what they look like. So just so you can see, you've got these printable locks, and they pull up and down so that students can sort of choose the right number, and then they will come to you as the tutor and say, I've put in this number. Can you just confirm and check that that's the right thing to do? Once you then get into the right number, you open up your escape room and you can go into your envelope. You get all the different items out, which are on the page. And then you get something like a crossword, and you can complete this crossword. You can see there are shaded in bits that once you've completed the crossword, the number is revealed for you to get into the next envelope. So the low budget one is sort of £5, and all of these are designed for you to be able to buy these resources, basically using a color printer and office equipment that you would have to hand in your universities anyway. And then there's a mid-budget one. So again, lockable locks. There's an envelope in here which has a lock built into it, which I thought was quite fancy. See if I can show you an example. Probably can't see it on the screen, but so it's an envelope with a three-digit code that you can open up, and it looks like this from a schematic point of view. So you've got two parts of the escape room. You've got the locked box. So puzzle 1, there's a 5-digit code to get into the box. And that's basically all the words on the outside. Once you get into the box, there's then a completed puzzle, which is your crossword, and then 2 incomplete puzzles. The incomplete jigsaw and an incomplete missing word puzzle. So you need to complete the crossword that will then let you get into your locked case, or your second locked envelope. Inside that, you'll then find the missing information for the jigsaw puzzle and for the missing word puzzle. And once you've got those, you'll have all the information that you need to complete the final puzzle, which is a grid of answers, and then it draws your attention to one particular answer within that grid. So normally the way that I would run these with people is if you wanted to create your own, we run a sort of like a 1-hour workshop, half an hour to an hour, to sort of develop familiarization with each puzzle and what you need to do. And then during that 1 hour, you can probably complete most of the puzzles through our kind of conversations. Then there's a kind of homework phase to finish off anything that didn't get done within that hour. It's usually 1 or 2 sentences to kind of set the theme of the escape room, finish off the puzzles. Like the crossword isn't easy to do within that hour, but it's quite straightforward to do outside of that. And then phase 3 is either you can order a copy and I'll just deliver it to you, or I can print things out and you can assemble it yourself, or you can just print and download the things using your own stuff. It's entirely up to you. And for anybody who is interested in doing it, I've pulled together the places that you can go to find the resources to actually make the mid-range one, with the rough kind of prices. But like I say, you can produce this from effectively no money at all, just using a handful of color printers, a bit of lamination, and some envelopes, all the way through to putting £25 into it to kind of create a box. So depends on what your budget is, and how easy or eye candy, like aesthetically pleasing you want it to be. All right, so that's nice and short conversation around escape rooms. So again, I don't know if there are questions around what this might look like in your world, or if escape rooms have a place, or if you've even done an escape room as an educational experience, as an educational activity, or just as an interesting experience to go to. Because as I've done these talks, I've found that often academics haven't done an escape room, and just understanding the mechanic of what do you break into and how do you do that and how are these things connected can be a bit of a stepping difficulty to kind of step through. So I tend to run these face-to-face with people first, so they can experience the escape room, and then work with people afterwards so that they can then customize their own one. So I'm open for questions or discussion.
I can start. David, a few slides back, I noted that you were leading a workshop and you had quite a few people there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one. That's I don't know, 25, 30 professionals.
Yeah, about that. These are conference delegates. So this is what the Playful Learning Conference looked like. So instead of just doing a presentation, we did a live 45-minute workshop where people could experiment with the escape room, received a pack, and then some of them started to work their way through it. But the important part was to play it, try it out, see how it worked for them.
Fascinating. I just wonder what sort of reflections or feedback that you had following this workshop. Did you sort of, anybody shared any other sort of escape room or similar practices that they already might be doing in the classroom?
Yeah.
Have they deployed since this workshop?
So there were a few people who run sort of like digital escape rooms. So there's various bits of software where you can have a digital space, and then you do some of the sort of short activities, and you go from room to room. So you kind of navigate through. There was another person who had created a microbiology escape room, and they used that to be able to sort of share, well, basically used it as a teaching tool with their students. And then from this, I think I found a network which do digital escape rooms. So there was a conference and it's digital escape rooms, and so all of their Padlets are just filled with loads of different examples of digital escape rooms across the sector. But as an outcome of this, I teamed up with another lady who was doing the microbiology one, and we've joined together to try to then create a local community of people who are interested in doing escape rooms. And so somebody up in Northumbria has also heard about it. So we joined up at the minute as 3 people interested in bringing escape rooms more widely, but with this sort of approach where can we create resources that people can take the template of those resources and then bring them into their practices? Because as I've seen escape rooms delivered, one of the challenges is it's a good detailed escape room for a particular setting, but then you have to effectively start from scratch if you want to bring it into another setting or work with somebody else to do something different, and that can be quite one, a learning curve, but also quite a significant time commitment. And given that we're all quite short on time, doing all of that learning curve from scratch when you're, 1, not sure if it's going to work, and 2, not sure if you're going to use it for more than 1 or 2 years is quite difficult to see the delivery side of it.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that. Maybe some of my colleagues, Andrea, Myra, I just wanted to make sure that I also mentioned Sue. Sue is joining us from University of Portsmouth. Sue,
Hi,
welcome.
Sue.
Thanks for good make time.
Thank you for the invite. Sounds fascinating.
Anybody's got any thoughts, questions, reflections?
I mean, it's not a question, but it's like I think it's the challenge of using these. My question would be, 1, as a resource in the classroom to make classes more engaging, does escape rooms like this seem appealing? And 2 would be, could you see yourself ever using an escape room? Or, would there be obstacles in the way that just prevent that as it's never going to be part of my world? Andrea's unmuted herself, which is always a sign.
It's just I'm just sort of thinking, because like when you explained the card games, you also made very clear what sort of skills people might develop. I'm not so, I mean, is this basically just to what's it called, to basically unleash the spirit of competitiveness and which group is finishing first? Or is there I don't know, have you actually used this, and if what do you teach using this? I mean, maybe it's just something I need to understand a bit more.
So in terms of different subjects, I've used it in innovation, and I've also used it in philosophy. And then we've got 3 other ones that are in development, one in economics, one in HRM, and one in sustainable leadership. And so I suppose the learning side of this is, one, the words that are on the outside of it. These words are just oh no, the words that are on the outside of it are words that are linked to the module. So in this one, you've got unintended, innovative, problem, interconnected, incremental. They all kind of tie into some form of literature or theory that I would have spoken about with students in the classroom. So I tend to bring these out like midterm, where students have covered a fair bit of content, and then we put it on the table and go, right, let's play the escape room to kind of get to grips with some of the puzzles. But then we do a debrief with them to go, okay, so what do these different terms relate to? Are they particular theories, different models, different authors? And then as the puzzles go through, you get them to either debrief their knowledge or familiarity of the words. So on one hand, you've got the subject familiarity that they're developing or demonstrating, and the other part is about how they complete these. So you've got, one of the challenges I see when people complete these is you have to think outside the box. You have to try to understand and decode what is the game that I'm playing with these puzzles, because one of them is lots of words, one of them's about trying to find a missing word, one of them's about trying to identify clues. So you're having to think outside the box and use your kind of analytical, critical judgment to solve them. But yeah, it's about, one, the skills that you develop amongst a social group, the skills you have to develop individually to actually address and solve the puzzles themselves, but then also the content that you're developing alongside the session, alongside the escape room. So the last part of this really is mostly for discussion. So the first thing I'd say is I am very mindful that there are all kinds of challenges and difficulties for doing these, whether it's prime games, whether it's escape rooms, or whether it's any of the other things we've spoken about, like the climate fresque, or I forgot the word. It was there and then it's gone. Oh, online quizzes. But I suppose playful learning more broadly, what are the difficulties and challenges of doing these sorts of things? And so I've got 2 slides that I think might be useful questions to kind of pose back to us as a group. What are the biggest challenges that you've faced or anticipate facing if you were going to bring any of these more playful approaches into your teaching? Are there opportunities of co-creating playful resources, amongst your own departments? So are there some people who are out there that you're already loosely familiar with that you might team up with to work with? And whether there are bigger institutional issues like structures or policies that either help us to bring in playful learning or hinder the adoption of playful learning in our modules, courses, or programs. Because I certainly find that the way that our programs are designed, with the way that our learning outcomes are there, the process in which programs are revalidated often doesn't put playful learning center stage. It puts it puts other things that are more scalable. So whether it's lectures, I'm going to deliver a lecture within 50 minutes to a large number of students because that's an efficient way of doing it, or I'm going to deliver learning outcomes on content as opposed to skill development. Content seems to have had center stage in our academic spaces to date, but employability skills, transformability, or getting student skill development seems to be being raised in a lot of conversations that I'm involved in for how should students be progressing or learning through our degrees.
one of the observations I have at the moment, these are really good questions, by the way, but it's quite pragmatic, I have to say, because we do face this on a daily basis, so to speak. But I think it's really important to clarify the purpose and objectives of these, very specific sessions early on. On some programs, I think it's important to recognize the students are very much assignment focused. At the same time, our struggle is to make sure that they are hooked into this topic. So they like to talk about these topics. They like to engage in those discussions in the classroom, peer to peer, peer to instructor, in various different ways. So I think looking back at the card games, for example, I'll come to the escape room shortly. But one of the things I was thinking about was you made the skills and competencies very clear. So before initiating a session on SDGs card games, for example, any of those 4 games, it's possible to send out a very clear, well-written blurb early on to say, this is what you're going to do, and these are the skills and competencies you're going to gain. And we can always sort of tie up the card game with a particular case study or discussion. I was just thinking on top of my head, one of the card games, I think it was the pumps. If the student groups, let's say, come up with a solution that recommends that, I don't know, they're looking at renewable energy project or a hydropower dam, for example, how that's going to solve some of the challenges in the community. And one of the recommendations that they make is the importance of engaging the local community in the decision making of the project. Fantastic. It shows, okay, the students are beginning to identify the importance of the last mile agents that we require in development projects, development decision making. But then at some point, we can start a class discussion looking at, okay, that's great, but why do you think the companies are unable to engage the local communities in the decision making in specific cases? Let's look at the other side. What are the challenges from the company's standpoint? So I think it's a really useful sort of a practice that we could actually start with the game and then connect the discussions with a case study rather than doing the other way around. Because more often than not, we start with a case study, students do the reading, look at the suggested solutions, we ask them, how are you going to execute it? So I think the cards, it's playful, it's, there's a peer-to-peer contact early on, there's a group bonding that's already there, we could leverage, and then introduce a case study so students can get more interested. So I think that there's an opportunity there. But in terms of challenges and for the escape room, I was thinking in terms of clarifying the purpose and objectives, ideally, when do you do it? Is it in, let's say, week 7, week 8 of a semester, or early on?
So with the escape rooms, I've seen examples of people doing it at the top as a sort of like as an orientation. So you've not done anything to do with this course so far, and I want to use these words to just introduce you to some of the key things. And then the way that the puzzles are set up, they're designed in a way that people can draw from their existing knowledge. I tend to do them in sort of week 4, week 5, after they've had a few bits of content, but not the whole course. And then I'll choose the words kind of like accordingly to go with that, so that they'll be familiar with some and they'll be unfamiliar with some other parts. But that way, there's another project as well called subject revision cards. And so that's basically, we start off with 50 cards that are the 50 words or phrases or concepts that you would want students to know through your module. So there obviously will be other ones, but you start with those 50 and you link them to a glossary of terms. So you can, after key lectures, you can bring them out and say, right, I want you to make sure you've added the however many terms to these revision card decks so that you know what those are and they can see knowledge being acquired as they go through. And you can play with those at the beginning of a module, after key lectures, and then you can do a kind of concept sort with them at the end. But like I say, it's a sort of fairly straightforward 50 words linked to whichever module it is that you've got, that students can use to basically self-evaluate their own knowledge. And so you can print them out as cards, or you can have them as a single A4 sheet of paper that students can then print off and take home and use it in their own way. But that way it gives students a sort of focus into what is this module about, which are the areas that I need to pay my attention into, so that if they're going to prioritize anywhere, you've got some resources that can kind of point them into the right kind of track. So the different tools I think you can use at different points in a module. I'd probably also say that when it comes to like engaging and interactive teaching, we do like a midterm module evaluation. So we tend to focus a lot of the early parts of the module on more interactive and engaging activities, so that students get that sort of like that first impression of what is this module about, and we use that as a way to get them hooked into these topics in interesting ways. And then the later half of the module, we do the more traditional sort of teaching with them.
Thank you, David. Colleagues, any questions? Anything that you would like to share from your experience?
I'm just sort of reflecting on what's been said, and I believe in particular, I mean, within my area of architectural technologies, we have a studio-based teaching, so there's a lot of, so technically each session is at least like a 3 hours session, or sometimes more, or 2-3 hours are next to each other, and there's a lot of remit for hands-on learning activities that is by doing. But I can also see that how much these sort of approaches would be good in getting students not only engaged, but also create this sort of sense of belonging to the course, especially for maybe some courses that are more sort of taught based in a way, or lecture based. I can see quite, and it kind of breaks down that sort of, like the way David, you're saying you're doing in this sort of second half of the term, then you do more of a traditional teaching, and then the first one, I think that can create this sense of belonging and engagement, and some hands-on work for the students that are different learners. I mean, we are now facing a population of students with, I mean, not now, I mean, all the time, with different, I mean, somebody was asking about ADHD and other neurodiverse students, and how they learn, and it could be quite different, and how at the start of their academic journey, if they found themselves in a lecture theatre of whatever many, 50, 60, hundreds of students, then you lose them very quickly. Coming from school. So maybe these activities actually at the beginning, as you said, would be quite impactful in getting them involved and engaged, or talking at least to each other in terms of finding their groups and getting engaged with, feel belonging and have a sense of belonging to their course, rather than just going and sitting in sort of more taught-based environment. I'm just thinking out loud. Sorry.
No, I think that's really useful. It's I think you're right. It's about adding a bit of diversity to some extent of the teaching experiences, and there will be some courses that are very hands-on, and other courses that are very, lecture driven. And what I'm always blown away with is that when I sit in a classroom without like tangible resources, I'll ask students to talk, and sometimes it can be like pulling teeth. And obviously sometimes you have your better classes and your worse classes. But whenever you put, whether it's revision cards or an escape room or these in front of them, something that's just a simple activity that they can get into, that is it's a good way of getting information and questions wrong, and they're really happy to kind of go for it because the stakes are low. Whereas if you ask for individuals to answer questions, it will just completely go silent. And that seems to be something that's changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years in classrooms. So I find these as a useful way of being an icebreaker into discussions, and then sort of talking about their understanding through something else. There's something else I want to work on called like thinking with things. It's a bit like Lego Serious Play, and I've seen it done in various ways. So using Lego, using very sort of like tactile fabrics and objects, or just using bits and bobs, sort of rainbow colors of different things, and you then get people to represent concepts or sort of like a teaching lesson through these objects, and then you get them to talk about the thing that they've created and what they're trying to represent through that. That idea of talking about your thoughts through an object seems to be really powerful to get people to talk and sort of access some of those deeper thoughts than just surface what do you think. And I've seen it done in a few different ways, but I've not done anything like that myself. It's an area I'd really like to explore. How does that sort of fit within my classroom, and how might other people make use of it? Go on, Andrea.
Yeah, I like that idea. We are currently discussing a lot, and I'm sure you do that in your institution as well, about how AI is creeping into the assessments and how students tend to rely on AI to do the assessments. So I think I'm chatting a lot with a colleague about the possibilities of portfolio assessment, and maybe to actually tie these kind of things into assessment might be quite nice, that they actually do like a reflection on having played a game, or what you just explained with them thinking through the object. They have to take a photo, and then they have to write down their reflections on this and why they actually chose that. So maybe there's also a way to explore how basically that can be more meaningful assessment through that.
Yeah. I think we did. I'm just trying to think. We have reflective logs in some of our modules, and one of them that would be, I think I'd have to try it out, but hard for AI to replicate, is where they play a game called Pandemic. So it's a large cooperative board game where the teams are working together to try to resolve these 4 diseases that are spreading across the world. It takes about 50 minutes to an hour and a half to play, but they really have to be on the ball to stop this disease from spreading. It's not very educational from a educational point of view. It's really good for communication, really good for teamwork, really good for kind of strategizing, and it would work in some more general modules. But as a reflection on playing that game, it would be very difficult for AI to articulate how decisions were made, or the interactions between players, or a particular moment in the game where something happened. I've not thought about how these things could link with assessments, but that might work quite nicely as a reflective tool.
I totally agree with that, and Andrea, the shift towards this reflections, or even like towards oracy, that the students have to talk about what they have done, which then that by the virtue of maybe presentation that we all already might be doing to a certain extent, but then because when they have to then talk about what they have done or presented and also talk through it, then at least we can be sure that they learned a little bit more than when you receive just a written assignment, which might have, to whatever certain degree, use of AI. At least they have read it, or if they gathered information, if they've done research to prepare themselves to actually stand and talk through it, take questions, then I think that's one step further towards bypassing written assignments. which these sort of games, or I don't know how you can have a game as part of assessment, but why not?
Yeah, there are some other sort of like more simulation-based games that take place over a 2 or 3 hour session. They do them in like the crisis and disaster module sometimes, where the game is set up, a disaster happens in a particular part of the world, and you've got responsibilities for these different departments and coordinating them on a strategic level. So you'd play over a number of rounds, make decisions about where you were going to send your resources, and then the outcome of the game is not so much controlled by chance, but more by your strategic decisions. So there are things that are out there that are interesting, that cross over a bit. I wondered, I'd just sort of I'd put some different questions up and see if any of those spark some thoughts. Do some of these playful learning approaches align or clash with our current assessment practices? What sorts of things would we do or could we do to help playful learning resources become scalable across different disciplines or class sizes? And then are there ways that we can use playful learning to deepen understandings of sustainability and responsibility management beyond a surface level engagement? But of course, sustainability and responsible management might not be the thing that you want to use games to get a deeper understanding of. So how might you take it beyond just playing the game to learn about whatever it is you want them to learn about, but going beyond a surface level of engagement? Because that's always the risk of these approaches. I've played the game, I've done the escape room, thank you very much, and then I'll move on to next week's activity, and the learning out of the activity kind of goes underplayed because you ran out of time or didn't do a debrief or whatever.
I think given that we all have access to Moodle or whatever virtual learning environment, I think discussion forums and making each student writing about these sort of activities in discussion forums create something that they can all go back to and read each other's reflections there. I think that's a good way of debriefing. I mean, to my experience, things that I've done when I asked them, and that was specifically, oh yeah, you have to do it, and this is part of your formative assessment type thing. Then they actually wrote about and they started conversations. So I think that is something that can be used for deepening their understanding and debriefing of whatever activity, in particular games, which we may not necessarily have. Maybe we run out of time, depending, because it's quite, you can't plan it, and you don't want to, when you see there's a very good discussion going on, you don't want to break it and say, oh no, move to the next stage or something. Yeah. Sometimes this is something that we can decide on the spot in the classroom, but then we have access to that, and if we make it sort of hopefully the students engage in that writing reflections there, that creates a forum, and it's actually there, it remains, that we can also reflect on how the activity went in different contexts.
Suppose it's a good way of getting feedback too.
Yeah, exactly. See who liked it, who not. So I mean, I did that for a series of Lego series play that I did in one of the modules, was about sustainability, sustainable design, sustainability. But I gave some questions and prompts to the students to write about, because they obviously were undergrad in second year and they didn't know what to, I mean, the reflective writing kind of made them a little bit uncomfortable. So a couple of questions and prompts actually helped in general within the brief, because it was part of a part of it had some 10% grading allocated to it in relation to one of the learning outcomes. But yeah.
No, I think that's really interesting. I've tried using discussion forums before, and I haven't been able to get students to engage with it. But the more that I've done CPD things, there's been often a digital platform with a discussion forum that I found very useful and effective. So whether it's building in as part of a formative assessment or a small allocation to a bigger summative part, I think that you can encourage learning to happen through those reflective moments.
Yeah, exactly. And they all had to actually take a photo of what they made in each group. And
photo of
individually
Lego
of
is good.
the Lego one, and then write something about it using some of the prompts, but then it was in an open platform, so everybody could see. Obviously, there was nothing to hide necessarily. And so long as they are engaged and they wrote about the prompts and questions, so it was maybe I shouldn't say that, but it was relatively the way I advertise it was that this is a very easy 10% that you can get. So why not engage with it? You've already done it, and these are the questions, write about them, and that sort of was something that they all engaged. But actually, I haven't done it for the last 2 years, so maybe something reminded me to go back to that actually.
No, excellent. I think that low hanging fruit, isn't it? That it's not a 30-40% thing. You can do these small activities, and you've already banked 10% of your grade.
Yeah.
Andrea.
Yeah, it's just something that you just said about discussion forums and electronic forums. It's I've made the observation in the last few years that students are more comfortable sharing their views if it's anonymous. So they don't like to out themselves. Like they might feel like they need to, they are seen by others in a discussion forum where their name is attached to it. So that's why, like, you can do the low-level post-it note reflections or yeah, increasingly these kind of sort of Mentimeter or whatever the equivalent is, to actually really ask them, like, even open-ended question, like ask them what are your thoughts on this, maybe as a reflection or something on something. And interestingly, that you get actually really good answers when you keep it anonymous, because they're not then afraid of being judged by others. But it's for me, it also then gave me a different dilemma, because you can then say, it's nice to get them engaged, but then obviously you do not know who said what, so you can't actually then give any like commendations for the student based on their classroom participation, because you don't know what they participated. But anyway, that's I just thought that was also is something that I find very interesting, that sort of, if they are given a degree of anonymity, then they are happy to contribute more.
Yeah, one of my favorite sessions that I run is it's an online session. So I see them face to face, but then I do 10 weeks of lectures, and I do 4 online sessions every 2 or 3 weeks. And in those online sessions, I say, right, we've basically come to the end of a theme that we're going to be talking about. And I know that some of you will know it back to front, some of you will have questions, and some of you will be lost. So we share a Word document, basically, and we stick it on the screen. I say, right, this Word document, you can just type in all the questions that you've got about your module, and I will answer them. So it can be about covering content, it can be about the assessment, it can be about anything, and you just get loads and loads and loads of comments that come out of this, because I know that they won't ask it to me in the classroom, and I don't have another way of being able to easily get it. So I found those sort of like online anonymous spaces to work really well for those. I don't know if the class is as playful learning, but as a way of being able to interact with people in a meaningful way, I think it does definitely do the engaging side of things.
I've always felt the impact of a particular class activity, regardless whether it's simulation or whatever you're trying out, depends a lot on the terminology or the currency that we use to define and capture something in particular. Just to give an example, I mean, when it's a simulation or a seminar activity, as opposed to saying playing cards, escape room, it brings the sort of the human side of the university. Like, we're going to do something together, come and play. So there's a strong urge for participants to say, hang on a second, did they just mention playing cards in the email? The
Yeah.
block of the event are more likely to show up there than just saying, a simulation game, which is playful enough by the sound of it. But when you say escape room, there's a thrill, there's a pull factor. And I was just thinking about the third bullet point that you have, the question that you have, the third one, how can playful learning be used deep in understanding? So one of the activities I was doing, this is some years ago, this was a module on responsible leadership, and I looked at the supply chain. So one of the activities I had was, in fact, looking at the slavery footprint that we leave behind based on our consumption baskets. So we did an activity and we had about 15 questions. This was an online game. I don't think it was a game, more like a quiz, based on the responses that tell you in the end that based on your current level of consumption and the consumption basket that you maintain, you help hire 206 slaves, for example. And the level of excitement in the class was, because the questions were quite personal, and everybody was playing that game on their own devices. So nobody knew anybody else's answer, except in the end, they had to share, if they wanted to, how many slaves they are helping to keep in jobs. And that was such a sort of, I could see that there was, some of the students didn't want to share.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of a competition. Hang on, I had 207, you had 196. So technically, I'm better than you. But the next year, I just thought, hang on, I'm not going to call this as a seminar activity, because of course it's a seminar activity. But if we could advertise it differently, and I think I named it something along the lines, confession time, do you encourage slavery? So it was like, what's happening there? The attendance was very high. So everybody came and they were just curious. Okay, well, what do you mean I encourage slavery? So I think that the jargon and the terminologies we use is really important. So when you say escape room, automatically there's a pull factor, I feel. And I think we need to bring more of these in the classroom than saying, today you're going to look at another Harvard case study. Like, you're sure, another one. As useful as they are. So it's making sure they are in the classroom. They like to come back to the classroom. And it's an opportunity to use these tools for that purpose.
Yeah, I think the label that you can put on these things is the part of it is the marketability of it, isn't it? So, do you want to do a case study, or do you want to find out if if you're employing lots of slaves? I think I'm also finding this more widely about course design. So, course design, the modules like organizational behavior, financial management are kind of out. They want modules that are very much about applied words, so that you can see, this module isn't about organizational behavior. It's about, I don't know, how well do you know your business, or something like that. And so this academic terms that we've stuck to for a long time seems to be pushed to the side much more in favor of like employability terms. How do you then get students to recognize or know that they're employability ready, which is to some extent some tension between our traditional academic stance on how we would do these things with the narratives of, are your students employable? And not only that, but can they recognize that they're employable or articulate that they're employable? Is it employable to say I've done a course in OB, or is it employable to say, I've managed to negotiate challenging conversations in business? Subtle changes possibly still doing very, very similar things, but the labeling of those can have quite a significant impact. I say this because we're doing revalidations of our undergraduate suite at the moment that I'm leading on. So we're under pressure from our marketing team to get sexier, more business-friendly titles in there. Fab. I don't have any other questions lined up. So I've thoroughly enjoyed presenting these things and sharing some of these insights with you, and I've really enjoyed your conversations back to me about the sorts of things that you're involved with as well. I don't know if there's any other talking points that you want to focus on, Rick?
Not really. I would thank you for this session, David, once again. This is probably, obviously I'm vaguely familiar with what you have been up to, let's say, since June, since I first met you in Belfast. But this is probably my first sort of orientation to everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
I don't think you recaptured everything today, but I think a big percentage of what has kept you occupied in the past 5 months. So thank you so much for such an insightful session, discussion points, and obviously this felt more like a conversation than a talk, which really benefited the purpose of this very session. So thank you once again. Humara, you got your hands raised.
I just wanted to thank everybody again for the sort of very interesting conversations. I wanted to add another dimension, if I may, at the end. Just, I don't know what your views are, David, and others on this. A lot of these games that we might be using, the ones that have this competition elements, they're kind of like double sword thing. In some ways might bring that of competition going on between the students, or maybe heighten the level of intensity of engagement. But at the same time, I found in my own experience in the classroom, sometimes they are less inclusive in a way that they immediately kind of cross off the ones that are not used to this competition, or they don't want to, or they have this anxiety, whether, you know, they want to come bottom of whatever ranking at the end is going to have. I mean, I understand there's this competition culture. You know, you open TV, there's cooking, singing, dancing, ice skating,
Sewing.
whatever, sewing, yeah, whatever you name it is just competition. And I think, and then yet we talk about collaboration as and team working as something that you do, and it's a transferable skill, very good for work environment. But again, you know, that sense, especially that might be a cultural thing. We have quite a diverse population demographics of our students, and some of them might not feel that comfortable engaging in that sort of competitive environment. So I personally use a lot of, find a way of not making it competitive. So nobody is coming first or second, or there's nobody's a loser.
Yeah.
And everybody is a winner just by the virtue of participation. There's no best solution discussed. I wanted to know what are your experiences on that.
I tend to follow the same sort of route. So in the classrooms, I tend to focus more on discussion, more on collaboration, and using these as a vehicle for discovery, as opposed to, you know, playing a hard and fast you win you lose rule. What I find is that the groups of boys I put the pumps cards in front of a whole group of people. Some of them just looked through them. Other ones really went to town, like, right, we're going to play this game and I am going to win. But I tend to take the approach of, we'll use these as a set of resources that will provide a platform that you can stand on that will help you then to get out into other spaces. So when I did the SDG memory game, Off the back of that, I went, right, you'll each have won a handful of these cards. Choose one of the cards that you're interested in. Go and visit the UN SDG website and find out more about that particular SDG in terms of targets, performance indicators, and progress. So we used it as a way, one, for them to get to know each other, two, for them to kind of a bit play together and have a bit of informal sort of laugh and a bit of light competition. But then as a tool for them to be able to then go and find out about something that I couldn't easily get them to go to otherwise, because I can show them a website, but whether they're interested in it or not is hit and miss, I think, between the students. So I used this as a way of sort of like, you're all doing the same thing, you've all got different areas, and then they would share between each other about what they're finding too. But yes, I agree. I'm not that interested in competition, ranking, high or low. It worries me a bit with some simulations where you have, say, 20 or 30 teams. If you're in the top 10, amazing. But if you're in the bottom 10, you have to start worrying a bit about yourself, maybe in those spaces. So, I think you're right to be mindful of some of the negative things that can probably impact students who are in the wider group of people. Like if I'm in the bottom half of a group versus the people who are the top performers.
Thank you.
So I wonder if you would like to share any, sorry, I didn't want to put you on the spot. Just wondering in case you would like to share any reflections.
Thank you. Sorry, I do apologise for not being able to be at the beginning because it does sound fascinating. I have to say, I spend most of my life with apprentices. So actually, the active learning element is a cornerstone of everything we need to do. And we are working in a very applied world. So everything we do, although, yes, we do still have staff that like to lecture in a traditional format, should we say, I believe that the nature of our apprentices is as students are evolving. So we already have people who are very active, want to know how to apply the learning immediately, but we have to give them the opportunity to apply immediately. So even the game I did come in and saw the end of, which was the escape room, my brain is already buzzing, going, actually, I can see how they could use this and then take this and use that at work to explain corporate policy, governance, sustainability, etc. So I can already see how that can be worked into. But it then is thinking, actually, the majority of our student population is moving into an applied world. And actually, if we look at, certainly in the United Kingdom, the expectation of policy evolution and the expectation of the way we are going to change teaching, I believe certainly the things you've been talking about, David, are moving us in a very sequential manner to the learning that you're talking about, this active process of learning. So I can already see from the little bit I did experience, I can already see that there are lots of ways I can even evolve what I do, which is quite practical anyway, to be much more inclusive with the games and have those active discussions. So I want to thank you for that, but I'm already writing lots of notes and thinking I need to go back and ask lots more questions when I've got through. This has been recorded, hasn't it, Rick? Yes.
Yeah.
So I need to go back and look at the recording first, and then I probably will have lots more questions on the back of, okay, so this is what they do, because I teach project management, leadership and management, and senior leader management. So all of those I'm looking at, yes, I can see how this can adapt quite easily, but make it much more inclusive and exciting. So thank you for what you've done, but I probably will come back with lots of questions. So I'll apologise.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And likewise, if there are some other things that you're looking at, whether it's the cards or escape rooms, and wondering, how do I either apply them, I'm quite happy to sit down in a workshop, sort of one-to-one thing, and run through, okay, how can I help you to develop something that would work in your space?
Thank you. That's terribly kind. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm just conscious of the time. I just wanted to check whether any of our MBA students who participated, some of them had to leave because they've got a session starting at 2 o'clock. They've got a break between 1 to 2. So the attendance spiked in this last 1 hour. So you got Akansha, Amanda, Mosem, Deepika, Nagi, Nikhil, Sana, Vivekanandan. I was not taking registers. I just wondered whether you've got any questions or reflections you would like to share with David or with any of us. Please do, leave comment on the chat or simply just unmute yourself. You can talk. Whatever works best for you. Hi, Amanda.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Amanda, and I'm an MBA student at Middlesex University, London. Thank you, Dr. David, for your talk and this session this afternoon. I found it very insightful and very interesting. I thank you, everyone, all the other lecturers, and everyone for their different opinions and viewpoints and standpoints. Have a very nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. That's very nice of you. Glad you could join us today. Anybody else? Sorry, I forgot to take the name of Paulo. Paulo is a colleague of ours as well. Paulo, if you'd like to share anything at all.
Now that you've mentioned me, it's good to see everyone.
So I didn't click on see all. I just saw all the names now. Go on.
Yeah, I'm professional services, but I am a recent postgraduate from Queen Mary. So it is insightful to see how we are, or at least business is getting to more interactive learning. As my experience from doing business as an undergraduate, most of the learning was very it wasn't very interactive. As someone with a whiteboard talking to you and you listening for a few hours for most of year 1 and year 2. In year 3, it was a bit more interactive. It was sort of coming in. Going to science and engineering, you'll see a lot of learning is much more problem solving and much more interactive, and people will collaborate a lot more. And especially because I did this partly during COVID lockdowns, they engaged a lot more with forums. So you see a lot more engagement in other areas, I think, than you would in sort of HR business and that kind of thing. But it's good to see a push in that direction, to see more practical solutions for it.
Excellent. Thanks, Paolo. It's yeah, I think it's an area for development in higher education, because when you look at primary school and secondary school, they have digital platforms like Twinkle, where they've got absolutely thousands of resources, very much tailor-made for delivering different subjects at different levels. But there seems to be a lot of that missing at higher education. So we fall back onto our traditional sort of teaching platforms of producing a lecture, but to enhance those things, there doesn't seem to be that much out there at the moment, which I would really like to get people talking about and find what sorts of things are people doing, because I'm certain that there are thousands of examples across our institutions, across our different subjects, of people doing interesting things. I think if we can pull some of those out and find some places to put them, that will hopefully provide resources for people to do more things like this.
On that note, thank you so much once again, David. Thank you for your time. And yeah, I think we need a sequel to this at some point. But have a lovely rest of the week. And obviously, hopefully, we can continue the conversation going forward. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We shall continue with our next Prime Impact Speaker Series next Thursday. I'll send you the details afterwards. Thank you, David, once again.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Nice to meet you all, and I'll speak to you later. Cheers,
Bye
Rick.
for now.
Bye.
Cheers.